256.010, runway 1 right, cleared for takeoff.
1 right, clear to go, yeah, 2
Cleared 4461, run right, left and wait.
Hey everyone, and a very big welcome to episode 21 of FlightCast. I'm your host, Jason Rosewell, and this is the one and only Infinite Flight podcast. We would love to see you on Facebook and Twitter, so if you haven't already, hop over to facebook.com/flightcastaudio or twitter.com/flightcastaudio and hit the like and or follow button. It's easy. You should do it. My guests today have both been on FlightCast before, so I've asked them to come back and we'll dive into the ever-competitive battle of aircraft manufacturing giants Boeing and Airbus. First, we have our friend Melvin, aka HeavyDriver, who you can see controlling on Infinite Flight often. He's a Boeing 777 First Officer in real life, and he joined us on episode 16 where we were talking turboprops. He's joining us today from Atlanta, Georgia. Melvin, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It's good to be here.
Awesome. My second guest today is also no stranger to FlightCast. In episode 4, Aernout joined me to talk about the Airbus A380 Super Jumbo, on which he's a first officer. He's joining me from a top secret location in the Middle East today. Aernout, very nice to have you back, man.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back from the top secret location.
Yeah, we can't
At least we have internet in there.
Hey, there you go. Yeah. It's a place in the world with internet.
That's it.
So you're not in North Korea.
It's more top secret than Area 51.
There you go. I've talked to both of you guys before to learn about how you got into flying, but new listeners who haven't listened to the back catalog yet may want to know. So let's do a quick recap. Aernout, let's start with you. What path did you take to get to where you are now with flying?
Okay, quick recap. I started in 2005 an integrated ATPL course in Madrid, which is more or less takes 2 years when you start from zero to frozen ATPL with instrument rating, multi-engine, and MCC course, and that's all you need to get a first job as a first officer. So everything is done within. I did it in 23 months, all the training, and after that, A320 type rating, which got me a job.
Okay, that sounds kind of like the path that our friend Dale McLaughlin's taking right now with EasyJet.
Yeah, except he is, if I'm correct, he goes via the airline.
Yes, correct.
And I did it. When I did it, it wasn't available yet. So for him, it's a great opportunity. You know?
Yeah,
at least he has some guarantee of a job. If he passes all the tests and he does what he has to do, it's a good motivation to study as well.
Yeah, and I'll be actually interested to talk to him when he's all finished because he's actually doing his sim training in a 737.
737, yeah.
Yeah, and then
Classic.
he's switching over to the A320 family series aircraft. So that'll be interesting to hear about, and it kind of relates to this episode. But Dale's not here, so let's continue on. Melvin, same question for you. Can you please recap your journey to being a 777 pilot?
Sure. Quick recap. I started in 2002 flying, and I did my private pilot as a senior in high school. After that, I went to university where I completed the rest of my ratings through flight instructor certificates. I instructed for a little while, maybe about 6 or 7 months or so, and flew corporate for about a year and a half before obtaining a job at the regional airlines. My first regional was actually the only regional that I worked for was American Eagle Airlines, which is wholly owned by American Airlines, and flew there for about 3.5 years and was lucky enough to be hired by my current employer, flying the 777.
Awesome. Fantastic. And just so new listeners know, we are not going to talk about who these guys fly for. That's a top secret bit of information, so we'll just leave that out there on the table for now.
An interesting thing here. There's a lot of people, they contact me, for sure Melvin as well, like which path do you take, how do you get to the cockpit and all that stuff. You can see the difference in the European way and the American way.
Mm-hmm.
So in Europe you can go straight away from flight training to what I did as a 320 type rating, but I ended up on the right seat of a 330. In the US, I think it's impossible. You have to gain at least 1,500 hours, if I'm correct.
That is correct.
It's a long path. You keep switching airplanes, airlines, or like flight instructor. You go from airplane to airplane, and you hop on. Actually, it's
we actually talk about that quite often on some of the long hauls. Is that the differences in the European model and the American model? I think there's definitely some advantages to the ab initio program, and definitely as is in a structured environment like Aernout went through. However, there's some advantages also to going through and getting at least a little bit of experience flying in a busy environment such as regional airline and progressing on through the ranks. But I don't think either one's better than the other. It's just a different mentality, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. I agree on that. And it's funny actually. You flew American Eagle, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a few friends here. They came for a few years on was it unplanned leave or like 3 years or something. So they came here, and now they're all happy back. In the meantime, they moved forward to American Airlines, if I'm correct, with the seniority they kept.
Very nice.
And then
that is correct. Yes.
Which is a pretty
That's awesome.
cool thing as well. Yeah.
So
But
you
just
can
keep the
actually
seniority.
you can actually keep your seniority and build hours even if you're in another country. Then
Yeah, I think they had
Yes,
a crisis or something, so they kept them as on the seniority, but they just told them, you have, in like 3 years you're not flying here or something. I don't know correct.
Yeah, you get a leave of absence. They gave 5-year leave of absences in I want to say 2008, 2009 timeframe to prevent having to furlough anybody. So anybody who wanted to take a voluntary leave could. And there was a lot of people who took on, whether they were military or had the ability to go to other airlines and gain experience. But I think that's awesome to hear that, a lot of guys went overseas and took advantage of not only one seeing the world, but, giving their families exposure to just a different way of living,
Yeah, it's great, man. It's a great opportunity at least as well. Because they came from, they flew? I think also, which airplanes you flew in Eagle? Like
the ATR
SAR?
72.
Yeah, and the ATR they came. So they came here on 320, and then they moved after a few years 777. And
Very
a
nice.
few months ago they went back home. And now they're captain on the Embraer 190, I think. And then next year they go to mainline.
Oh, very nice.
what does that mean, Aernout mainline?
American Airlines. So I don't know if this exactly if it's still American Eagle, the Embraer, or it's already American Airlines.
Okay, got it.
And then you can move on from. That's what they told me. And then you go from American Eagle. Your seniority moves you into American Airlines.
Got it.
Yep.
Nice.
It's,
Okay, well, I can already see that it might be difficult to keep us on track because we're going to veer off onto lots of little rabbit trails. But let's give it a shot. Today we're here to discuss some of the differences between Boeing and Airbus. So most of our listeners will know that these already are in infinite flight, lots of them. So we'll get to those. But first we need to know the answer to some of these questions. And these may dictate the tone and direction of our chat. So first, have either of you flown both makes, Boeing and Airbus?
no, not at all.
I've only flown Boeing products.
And
Wow,
for me, only
okay.
Airbus. So.
All right. So, and what about simulator time? Have either of you flown, let's say, like what Dale's doing, a 737 in the simulator or something like that, and then over to Airbus or vice versa?
Sorry, man. I have to disappoint you again.
Wow.
Only
all right.
Airbus.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yep, same as Aernout, just Boeing products in terms of Sims and a few Falcons and stuff. That's as close as I've gotten to an Airbus product.
Okay. All right. So next question then. Do either of you have strong opinions about Boeing or Airbus and which is superior? I know, Melvin, you do.
Well, I think in terms of experience, Boeing has a lot more. They've been around for over 100 years. They actually just celebrated that a few years back. And Boeing started out with flying boats and, big turboprops that were 4 engines. And they've really been on the change of innovation ever since they started in the industry. Another thing about Boeing was started by, obviously, Boeing Sr. or the original Boeing, but also by the founder, McDonnell Douglas. And unfortunately, they had a falling out, and that's how McDonnell Douglas came into its glory. But those two have always competed with each other to build better airplanes. If you read a little bit of the history of Pan Am, and especially Juan Trippe, you'll see a lot of DC-8 versus the Boeing 707, it's always been a battle. But in terms of just being better, I just think that Boeing's always been on the innovative lead of technology within the industry because they've always had to compete with their original competitors. But I haven't flown an Airbus, so I'm kind of biased.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Aernout?
I don't really know. I have no experience on Boeing. I would love to try it, but I don't know. For me, it's Airbus. I did my CRM course, or MCC, whatever you want to call it. It's the same in the end on the 320 simulator. So my first jet simulator experience was the 320, and from there on I just moved on. So I was already familiar with the whole concept.
So you did your simulator training in the 320, and then moved on to the 330, and then to the 380.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Well, what I heard from people is it's also easier to go from, if I'm correct, from Boeing to Airbus than the other way around. From Airbus to Boeing could be very complicated to adapt. But
I've heard that as well.
And why would that be?
I would love to try Boeing one day, but now I'm fine. I'm more than happy. And at this point of my life, for me, it's more important my lifestyle and destinations than the airplane that brings me there.
Ah, okay.
And
Before you start to fly, you want to fly, you have a big preference. But for me, now, after flying for 7 years, whatever brings the best lifestyle, especially with a family, of course.
Good words.
And as Aernout said as well, but we always talk about what we prefer, Boeing, Airbus, Embraer, Bombardier, but really at the end of the day, the airplane that, pays you the most and gives you the best quality of life is the best airplane out there.
Sure thing.
Well, you need to probably find yourself in Atlanta, Georgia at some point, Aernout, because we probably know some people that can get you in a Boeing simulator.
That would be interesting. I had a jump seat ride the other day on the 777.
Oh,
actually,
nice.
Because the flight was completely full. And luckily, we can still, as company staff, flight deck staff, we can get the jump seat if the captains approve it.
Hopefully the flight wasn't too long. I've heard the jump seat is not the most comfortable ride.
No, but after the jump seat, I went to the bunk, 20,000 feet, just to the bunk, so it was perfect. But it's interesting, the whole overhead, it's so different compared to the Airbus. It looked very messy to me, because in the Airbus, everything is organized. Every panel has all the buttons. You have like air, electrical, and those buttons are there. But on the Boeing, they went from left to right, up to bottom. We have more like a flow. You just go from bottom to top, bottom to top.
Oh.
I don't know if maybe it's just me because it was the first time. I don't know if Melvin can say something about that. When you do the cockpit preparation, for us, with, for example, the overhead, you just follow it once. You just go from bottom to top, and that 3 times in a row, and you're done. But I saw these guys switching buttons and going left, right, up and down.
Well, at least for cockpit preparation, different airlines have different flows. Boeing's very big on the areas of responsibility. Captain has his duties, first officer has their duties. But for the most part, at least at my airline, the first officer is in charge of the entire overhead panel, down to his oxygen mask, across his pretty much his PFD and his navigation display, or as we see in Infinite Flight, the display screens, including the landing gear area, down to the flaps and all the way to the rudder trim is where they stop. So there's really not much that I would say a captain has to do, but it's more of a flow because you start at the top and then you end at the very bottom. And then the only other thing that you do from there is right before you push back from the gate, you pressurize your hydraulics, you pressurize your fuel, and turn on the beacon, and then you start engines. It's a pretty mostly left or right flow for the most part, but as you said before, or as I said before rather, different airlines have different flows, so I would probably have to see it. But the nice thing about the triple is that even though there may be a lot to set up, it's a very automatic airplane. There's really, even with engine failures, not a lot of stuff that we touch.
But that's interesting as well what you say, because you as FO, you do the whole setup more or less. For us, it's the pilot flying who does it. So even if the captain is pilot flying, it's his responsibility, and the other guy does the walk around in the meantime. So I expect that if you will be captain, you do the walk around every day.
You wish.
Oh, so you have
Most
to
of the
do
time,
the
the captain
setup
sits
and walk around.
in the walk around.
Oh,
But
you're
we always
busy.
fly with 3 pilots for the most part. If we are a 2-pilot crew, then we delegate to efficiency standard and keep it
Exactly.
going.
Ah, that's good.
Okay.
That's
So
interesting.
that's one thing that we've heard already, that Aernout, you an Airbus feature that you like is the flow of the switches and controls and everything. So while we're on it, Aernout, why don't you are there any other features that of the Airbus that you just love?
The table. The simplest thing there is, but that's what most Airbus pilots say, a table.
Because you don't have a yoke in the way.
Yeah, there's no joke, and if you have a long haul flight or 7, 8, 10, 12 hours, you have a table, you can put your food on the table, you have more space to adjust and relax a little bit. You can put your legs however you want, in your neck if you want. So there's no joke.
Melvin,
Even
how
though
do
I would
you
love to try the joke, but
Melvin, how
it's
do you
such a
eat your
simple
food
thing.
with no table?
We have trays that we get. We just slide our chairs back. They're electronic, but we always see that Airbus pilots need a place for their coloring books. So, tray table does
Very
come in handy
true.
for them.
Very
That's
true.
awesome.
Coloring books.
Okay, so same question for you then, Melvin. Are there any Airbus or Boeing features that you just love that you feel like you might not get with an Airbus?
I love the yoke. Just looking back at, especially as of recent, and I'm not saying this is a reflection on Airbus because, Airbus doesn't fly the airplanes, the pilots fly the airplane. But I think in terms of creating a good CRM environment and keeping both pilots in the loop in terms of what the other one's doing, I like the fact that, the yoke is truly, it's a yoke. It's what original airplanes had. The very first airplane didn't have a stick. It had a control column. But also you can see the force feedback or the real-time feedback that's happening. Whether the pilot's flying or whether, the captain's flying or the FO's flying, whatever's happening is right in front of you and you can see it moving. So if things aren't going the way that you suspect or expect them to be, then you can see it. Also, Boeing tends to be more, and this is just basing off of riding in the jump seat, like Aernout said before, but in terms of being pilot friendly and letting the pilot control more and not the computer, I like that with the Boeing, even as advanced as the 777 and 787s are, you can still override the computer. The computer will try to fight back at you, but you can override and do as you see fit for the situation at hand. I'm not too well versed on the laws system on the Airbus, but I know that it has its limits, and once you reach the limit, you can't go past it.
Yeah.
Any comments on
That's
that,
true.
Aernout?
Yeah, but those limits are like 30 degrees nose up. I think in a normal situation, you will never reach these limits. Or 67 degrees bank angle. I don't know if you're going to try that. I have never done that.
Oh, I hope not.
That's the thing. There are all these laws. Or the protections. They are, if you get outside, well, they say outside of the envelope, which is 1G, but it's non-standard. Or I don't know, if you have to do something like that, it's an unlucky day.
So,
But what you say about
That's true. That's pretty true.
what you say about the joke compared to the side stick is really true. That's one thing I don't like about the Airbus, that you have no idea what the other guy is doing.
Oh, okay. So his side stick doesn't move if you're flying; it just stays there.
No, it doesn't. It just stays there. And if you put, let's say one guy puts up, you put down, you will stay neutral. Or if you both go to the left, you go sharp left. It's added, the commands.
Okay.
And then you have a button, a side stick overtake button. Then it will say whatever, priority left, priority right, and then one guy has control.
Okay.
But if the other guy presses the button, he has control again. So it never happens in a normal flight, of course. But
right.
If hits the fan and you start putting, or let's say I'm pilot flying and the captain sees something he doesn't like and he starts to interfere without saying anything or taking over priority,
That could be trouble.
you end up in a bad situation. Yeah. Imagine it flaring, and I flare a bit late and he flares strong, and I just increase my flare, you're gonna boom, you have a tail strike. And especially on training, well, with unexperienced people, for sure, it's a lot of sweat for training captains. You don't know what the guy is gonna do. Is he gonna flare on time or not? That's what you have on a Boeing. You see it, you feel it, you can help each other.
So, Melvin, if you're in the Boeing with the yoke, you can actually have your hands on the controls and feel what's happening, even if you're not making inputs yourself.
Oh yeah, and it's something that we joke about. If let's say I'm flying and I could be flying with Aernout, if he's like keying the mic on his yoke to talk to ATC instead of using the control panel, and I'm hand flying, I can feel the tension of his hand on the yoke, whether it's an intentional force feedback that he's given, like, hey, don't turn so sharply, or whether it's just him resting his hand there talking to ATC. You can actually feel, everything. But another thing about the Boeing that I prefer, at least from a bystander viewpoint, is the fact that our auto throttles actually move. So when we set our thrust levers, our thrust levers, like in infinite flight, they move back and forth. From what I've seen in the Airbus, and I could be wrong on that, please correct me if I am, but when you put your thrust up, it's just sitting in a detent and it just sits there.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
If you have an engine that rolls back or loses power, at least the first visual cue, you're not going to see. Versus in the Boeing, every time those things move even, a 1%, you see the force feedback, which is pretty nice about that.
So let's say if you have an engine stall on number one, the left lever is going to go backwards, or it stays in the position?
They sync up, so you'll see both of them move initially, and then the computer will figure out, hey, we, for instance, we have a compressor stall. Well, you're going to recognize it because both of them are going to come back and you're going to hear the noise. But we can individually turn off each servo for our thrust lever, so you can have the right one working and the left one disengaged.
But it's interesting if both come back, because let's say number one fails, you don't want number two to reduce the thrust. Or do I misunderstand? They don't come back that much
more. They'll come back up to initially about 5%.
Okay.
Is what you'll see, because once it notices a 10% difference in thrust on each engine, then it knows that there's a failure, and it's almost instantaneously. But you'll see it come back just a little bit.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's what you say about Airbus. It's true, but we have on the engine warning display, you see the amount of thrust, and it's like a little donut, so you can see exactly where on the screen where the maneuverable thrust lever is, and you can adjust it to that before you disconnect it. It takes a bit of time to get used to, but it's very easy if you're used to it, though. And we don't touch it from. We put it flex or toga at takeoff, and at thrust reduction you put it in climb, and you don't touch it until you do the flare, because then you put thrust in idle.
That's interesting.
So Melvin, it's pretty clear that you love flying the Boeing. What are some features maybe that you aren't so fond of?
The cockpit ergonomics could improve, especially in their long-haul aircraft. At least in the 777, we spend a lot of time in the flight deck, just like the A380, and it would be nice to have a little bit more comfortable seats. I think that the seats are still kind of based off of fighter jet airplanes for a good reason. The seats are based on spine compression. If you have a crash, you don't want somebody to break their back. So essentially that's why the seats are designed the way they are. But I just think from a cushioning standpoint, they could do a little bit better. But also, as I mentioned before, or maybe I didn't mention before, the 737 overhead panel is long overdue for update. It's very much synonymous with how the original 737 was, that was built back in the 60s. And with all the technology that is available between the 777, which is now a 22-year-old airplane, and the 787, there should be more automatic logic in the 737 overhead cockpit panel. But those are the only things I can really think about.
Okay. How about you, Aernout?
Well, not much actually. It's the only thing I've seen, and I've been going from 320, which is, of course, in the beginning it's a huge cockpit, but now it's small. The 330 is like an average, but the 380 it's so big and everything is so neat and clean and organized.
It's like you've got a little
for a
condo in the sky.
It is on, yeah. And then the best thing is behind the cockpit is a private toilet for the flight deck. There's 2 bunks, and you don't even have to leave the whole cockpit area to rest or to go to the toilet anymore.
Actually, speaking of that, since I think it was a German company had the pilot lock the
German wings,
lock the captain out of the cockpit. Since then, a lot of airlines have said, well, nobody leaves or goes into or leaves the flight deck in flight. So, Melvin, how does that work with you guys on long hauls?
I'm not going to say that's never been an issue, but we have regulations here that at all times there must always be 2 people on the flight deck, whether it's 2 pilots, a pilot and a flight attendant. Of course, on a domestic flight, such as if you ride on Southwest Airlines, you're not going to see a third pilot just come up from 12A and say, "Oh, hey, guy has to go to the bathroom. I'm going to jump on the flight deck for this moment." Domestically, you're going to have a flight attendant block the aisle, depending on their security codes. And one flight attendant will go to the flight deck, and then a couple more will probably block the aisle just for security purposes, while the crew member goes back and uses the restroom. On long-haul flights, most of the time we fly with 3 or 4 pilots, so you're just going to see another crew, if they're not already up there, go to the cockpit and relieve the crew that needs to take their meal break or use the bathroom. So,
okay, nice. So, guys, let's bring it over to Infinite Flight for a minute. Are there any features on the A380 and Infinite Flight? And Aernout, you might have touched on this when I had you on before, but any features that you think they've really nailed when compared to the real deal?
Well, the flaps are great. They changed it very nice. But no, the whole airplane is fine. I must say I haven't flown it in a while. But I mean, what I said before in the other podcast, the physics seems very, very accurate to me. The looks. I like the cockpit, the virtual cockpit. It's great.
Okay, so in terms of flight physics and flap settings and all that kind of stuff, you feel like that's a good representation? Landing speeds,
for sure.
that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I never, following in real life experience I never stumbled into any troubles with the landing speeds or the weights and takeoff flaps with settings and speeds.
Okay.
That's they nailed it really well.
And what about the 777, Melvin?
Well, when Aernout's not flying the 777, just kidding. I think the 777-200 is, for the most part, on par with the actual airplane. I think a lot of time was put into making sure the performance numbers matched real life flying for the airplane. Just like we were talking earlier, there's no simulator in the world that's going to mimic the actual airplane. Even the 6-axis full motion simulators that we use for training have their quirks that are misrepresentations of the actual aircraft. But in short, I think the 200 is pretty precise with the weights and the flight characteristics. It's a heavy airplane, just like the A380, so it's going to fly a little bit heavy. The 777-300, I don't get to fly that much on Infinite Flight, but I think I remember it needing just a little bit of tweaking, but perhaps that's something that will happen down the road here.
And when you're flying the 777, a comment I see on Facebook quite often, and I think a few people made it for this episode, comments about the thing being really hard to slow down. Is that something you have to plan carefully when you're on an approach or a descent in real life?
It is. Let's say we're cruising at altitude of 35,000 feet. The 777 has a very, very clean wing. It's very aerodynamic. She wants to fly, with that's bearing no flaps out, no gear out. So if you're not ahead of the airplane, if you're not thinking, down the road, 30, 40, 50 miles down the road, hey, where do I want to be at this point? She'll definitely take you for a ride. She's hard to slow down. It takes average, if you're in level flight, 10,000 feet, to go from 310 knots to 250 knots, you're going to eat up about 10 miles, which is about a minute roughly, but from realistic experience, it's more like closer to about 3-4 minutes, and that's without using any speed brakes or flight spoilers as they're noted in the game.
Okay, so you if you want to descend through 10,000, then you need to plan ahead and make sure that you're slow enough to do that.
For sure, because our typical descent is a Mach 0.82, 300 and about 300 knot descent. So if you're descending and you're trying to slow down, well, you can't do both at the same time. So usually you're going to want to plan if controllers know that you're coming from 300 knots to 250, 240 knots. So they usually give you, descend lower a little bit earlier because they know that it's going to take you a little bit more time than, let's say, Embraer 190 or maybe a turboprop to get below 10,000 feet or get below 250 knots in order to get below 10,000 feet. So.
Okay. It's so great to be able to track flights live and find places to open frequencies where the traffic is in infinite flight. Cam is here to tell us a bit more about live flight.
I think you pretty much nailed it, Jason.
Awesome, but there is more to it than just flight tracking.
Indeed. Have you tried flying with a joystick on your iPad yet? The Autonav feature in Connect is pretty sweet too, I must admit.
So what's coming next for live flight?
You'll have to wait and see, but let's just say flying on infinite flight will never be the same again. Go and check out what we have out now though. You easily spend countless hours tracking flights in infinite flight live whilst doing some proper joystick flying.
Thanks, Cam. In the meantime, everyone, head over to liveflightapp.com for your next flight. Now back to the podcast. So guys, I just have to ask, I think we owe it to our listeners to ask this question, which one is better? So we'll call this the bare knuckle round. Let's hear it. What do you guys have to say about it? I know that you guys don't fly both and you haven't flown both, but let's hear, we've heard some of your pros and cons. Let's have it. Which one's better?
Airbus. Ask the airlines, they will tell you.
Oh, why is that?
They buy it more than Boeing nowadays.
Ooh. The gloves are off.
Boom.
I mean, Jason, what can I say? 100 years of greatness. Need I say more? I mean,
But it depends though. You can see the 320 is selling better than the 737, but then the 777 is selling better than like a 330. I know they're not comparable, but or like the 787 and the 350 is going to be interesting, or the 787 and the 330 Neo. It depends on the airplane, I think. Like Airbus, the 320 and the 737, I think it will be Airbus. But for long haul, it could be different story. We have to see how it's going to be with the new 787s and the 350.
Well, that was leading into my next question. We've got the Dreamliner and the A350 XWB, I guess, is the most current one.
Extra wide body.
Extra wide body, there you go. Okay. And then the 320 Neo and the 737 MAX, which I think they just started rolling out the 737 MAX recently, did they not?
It's still in flight testing right now.
Did they change that overhead in that one, or it's still the...
They did. They changed a lot of stuff on there, but there's still a lot of stuff from the original. They can only change, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's around 150 items before they had to create a new type rating. So they didn't want to veer too much from, keeping a consistent type with the NG. So
for sure.
When you say 150 items, what do you mean by that?
Let's say 737 is notorious for the super large trim wheel that is probably one of the most annoying sounds in the world when it moves. Versus most of your older Boeings, well, even though the 737 is old, but like your 767 and your 777s have just a little digital representation of your trim. There's, not this big massive wheel that's spinning and,
And what's the
creating
purpose of the
noises.
wheel? Why do they even have it?
It's, from my understanding, I'm not typed in the 737, but I believe it's for manual reversion. If the electronic trim stops working, you can actually physically move the wheel, like when you first start flying Cessnas and Pipers.
Oh man, that thing spins a lot when it's in flight. You'd have to be spinning it like a. It'd be a workout.
If I'm right. Huh?
Yeah.
Yes, it's super fast when it spins.
Don't lose your fingers, or your kneecap or something.
You don't want to get your shirt or your tie caught in there.
Oh no, it'd be a really bad day.
One
safety
down.
hazard.
But Jason, to also add to the Boeing versus Airbus, Airbus still has yet to find a competition for the 757, and airlines are still asking Boeing to reopen the 757 line, and it's actually something that they're actively looking at because there's nothing that can fly straight up to cruise altitude and fly 4,100 nautical miles, with full packs and cargo.
There is A330.
It's supposed to be a 777 competition, but then again, Airbus hasn't answered that either.
No, but the 330 is a lot smaller than the 777. The 300, you do 300 passengers in average, and the 200 to 60. I think the 777 is you have more.
We carry 380 on our 777, but your typical 200 is going to be around 270 passengers, and the 300 is like a 320 passenger.
Where does the 767 fit in all this?
330 is, I think. That's
yeah.
Okay.
767 is it's about like a 6,700 nautical mile long range bird, and it's about a 200 and you can do 290 packs on it, but your typical airline is going to fly probably around 240 to 250.
And if I'm correct, Airbus made the 340 as the competitor for the 777, but it didn't really work out. But I'm not so sure about that. That's something that just pops up in my mind that I've heard somewhere. Because that's for, like, the 340-600 is to go far, like the 777.
Yeah.
But that didn't work out. So now we got the 350. Try again.
What I think is great is that the Dreamliner has push-button dimmable windows.
The Dreamliner is a nightmare.
Okay, why don't you expand on that?
Line.
Why do you say that?
Passenger-wise, it's a nightmare.
Actually, you know what? I heard that from somebody. They told me, oh yeah, we Air Canada has one of them, I think, at this point. And they said they rode on the Dreamliner, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. How was it? They said, it's an airplane. It was actually not great, not comfortable.
What I've heard and seen in the Middle East and from people is that it's one of the airplanes which is the most unreliable, with the most airplanes on grounds and delays because of technical stuff. And in the end, the whole fleet got grounded for a few months.
Oh, that
never happened to Airbus. Huh?
That was an electronic issue with
the battery.
Yeah, batteries blowing up or something.
Lithium-ion batteries on board, new ones. But I'm not a fan of the 787.
How about you, Melvin? Any thoughts
on
the
Dreamliner? Flying ones, but as passenger-wise, not at all.
That's one thing about Boeing that I didn't get to say earlier when you asked me something that I don't like about Boeing is that, Boeing is made around the pilot. That's their main focus is, can a pilot fly? Will they be comfortable? Will it meet all their expectations and be able to be safely operated from a flight standard point of view? Passenger ergonomics has never been their strong point, but at least for me personally, I rather the pilots, have more control and be safer than, be comfortable. But as Aernout said, when you're you're traveling for 12 hours or 15 hours, well, depending on your destination, sitting in the back in an uncomfortable seat really does suck. I think the dimmable windows are amazing. I've flown the 787 a couple of times as a passenger, and personally, I had no issues with it. But the dimmable window doesn't replace a shade. It can only get so dim, and the sun is super bright. Brighter than we can look at with the visible eye. So, there's always going to be those things, but
that's the dimmable window is for passengers, right, Jason? That's the one you mean?
Yes, correct.
Because that function doesn't work on ground. So if you're in the full sun, you cannot dim your window as a passenger. Only in the air it will work.
Well, that seems
exactly
silly.
So you're, that does.
But I do think that the mission of the 787 is supposed to be the 767 replacement, because really the only 767s that are still being produced are cargo. And actually, FedEx has a huge order for the cargo 767, but the 787 was to replace 767. I think it's done a great job. It's the first airplane out there that is not using engine bleed air to pressurize the cabin and also, provide heating and cooling. It's all electric pressurized, and it's pretty amazing that they came out with that system. You feel more refreshed when you land. You're not tired or drowsy, and your skin's not dry from all the air that's being pumped through the cabin. I think is amazing.
That's actually a huge bonus for somebody like me. I
But even
I have dry skin, so that's
on the 380 it stays lower. The cabin altitude. Sorry, it's between 6,500 feet, 7,000. It doesn't get higher anymore. It's with 330 it went higher as well, like 8,000 or something. Correct.
Well, and we also have to look at things like fuel consumption and all that kind of stuff too, right? Which is a huge focus of selling these new aircraft.
And I think the 787, is super fuel efficient. But as Aernout mentioned earlier, it is scary from the standpoint that it's an electric airplane. It has some huge generators on it. It has some huge batteries on it, and I think it was Japan Airlines actually that had that fire. Even
Ethiopian, they had one in APU fire in London, I remember.
And that's scary.
Yeah, it's not cool.
That's super scary for a pilot and a passenger. We train about it, but it's one of those things that you train that you hope you never see. You just say, oh, every 6 months we'll go to the simulator and we'll practice this and hopefully never see it. But when you see it on a consistent basis, especially for a new airplane, it'll make you wonder. But hopefully in 20 years from now, we'll just look back and say, well, that was a hiccup, and go on from there.
Yeah, for sure. And
it's going to be interesting, the bigger one, if they're going to get the Dash 9, more of them, or the Dash 10. The 8 is like a 321 on steroids, we say sometimes. But it's not that
yeah. With 8 has, I don't know why Boeing does this. I'm not an engineer, obviously, but you see with the 767 as well. 767-300 came out first, I believe, and then they came out with the 200. But the shorter ones, like the 787-8, will have a super long range. And then, they'll come out with like the 787-9, which will carry more passengers, but have a little bit less range. And the 10, I haven't seen any specs on the 10, but I hope they kind of bridge that gap with the range versus payload type of deal that they have going on.
Yeah. It's the same with the 330-200. It's less passengers, so it can fly further. And the 300 has more passengers, and it's a bit less distance.
And all these things, I would assume the manufacturers are thinking about sales too, right? The airlines want to save money. They want to look out for their bottom line. And that's got to be, I would think, priority number one over pilot maneuverability and comfort, over passenger comfort, all that stuff. I mean, that passenger comfort is great, but that's got to be secondary to looking out for an airline's bottom line.
But that's one good thing for Boeing, Melvin. What you say, they think out of a pilot's point of view. Airbus manuals are written by lawyers. Manuals.
I think that goes for Boeing as well.
Because a lot of people say Boeing manuals are so much easier compared to Airbus. Some friends I know, they flew both. They always say as a joke, like Airbus manuals are written by lawyers, or they're translated from French to English. Could be as well, of course.
Yeah, I did have a friend who went through all the Airbus training recently and a couple of years ago, and he said it was a beast, and he came from flying a 737. So guys, let's get back to infinite flight here. What would you guys like to see next for aircraft, whether it's Boeing or Airbus or otherwise?
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not that much into these details because it's a tablet thing. That's what I said in the other podcast as well. A lot of people, they want all these details. And when I fly, I don't look outside of the airplane. I just fly with the HUD mode on and I fly.
Right.
Even if the airplane would be without wings, I wouldn't be too bothered, for example.
That probably wouldn't be a good business move for
I
you.
mean, I'm not going to be outside looking at my landing personally. I just try it with the HUD and that's it. I'm happy. But like the 320 when it came out, it's great. And the dash, you can see the difference with the general airplanes. Let's call them like that. And,
personally, I like to see maybe like another single engine turboprop like the Pilatus or I think the Concorde would be fun. But honestly, I agree with Aernout is that we have a great aircraft complement. You kind of have to ask at what point do you just have too many airplanes where you just keep adding and adding and adding. I think that Matt, Phillip, and all the other developers have kind of gone to a great viewpoint now where they're focusing more on, let's tweak the actual flight sim itself. Let's introduce things that we originally wanted to put on our task list, but, we got to airplanes or, I remember when it came out with live mode, that was a big task. And so I guess I saw on Instagram or maybe IFFG the other day that they're working on global flight. So, that's something that's a huge undertaking. And based on the picture that they posted, it looks like, there's some cool things to come. So personally, the only thing that I guess would be a big ticket on my list would be working flight instruments. I understand the complexity behind that, and also the fact that, as Aernout said, it's a tablet. We have to be realistic and say this is not your gaming PC that has 2 video cards and 8-core processor. That's clocking out at some crazy speed. We're talking about the at least the most impressive thing out there is either the Nvidia Shield or the iPad Pro with the latest chips. Even with the latest chips, they're not a full gaming PC. So I think that regardless of your background, whether you're a pilot or a non-pilot, we just have to keep in mind that this is a mobile flight sim. As amazing as it is, it blows every other flight sim out there that at least I've played on a mobile tablet out the water. From flight physics to realism, so on and so forth. But just keep in mind that it's mobile, and that's it.
Yeah.
One airplane I would like to see though. The other day I was talking with the other forum mods about it. The Python would be really cool to have as a fighter. It's the one that
pretty wicked.
That's the one that goes up and down like a helicopter, and then just moves the thrust, and you fly like a fighter.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Just to have something else, and then you can do vertical takeoff and landing suddenly.
I think the Concorde would be fun too, especially if they're implementing global flight like they haven't just hinted at it, they've said they are. That's what's coming.
It's confirmed, huh?
It's confirmed, and yep. With the, it looks like the rendering on the atmosphere and things like that is it's looking amazing from the last photo that was posted. Yeah, really, seriously. So it wouldn't surprise me if we had something like the Concorde coming up next, and that would be really, really cool. Just for something, like you said, something different,
Sure, that would be nice.
So guys, let's take some questions from Facebook. We need to move along here. So Dan is asking, and I thought this was an interesting question. He says, when I fly as a passenger, I get slightly nervous on takeoff and landing. Do you experience this at all, even in the slightest, or are you concentrating so much that you haven't noticed? And it's funny because I actually was talking, when I lived in Indiana in the U.S., I was talking to a friend who was a first officer for United, And at the time, he was actually out of work. And he was telling me once, I asked him the same question. Do you get bored? I had a pilot friend once tell me that he wouldn't wish this job on his worst enemy because he was so bored doing long hauls. And this guy said, it for me, flying, he flew regional, but across the country kind of thing. Being an airline pilot is hours of boredom followed by a few minutes of sheer terror. So to me, that wasn't a great description of being an airline pilot. No. So how do you guys feel about this question?
That's an old joke, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So how do you guys feel about it?
I mean, I get nervous too, but there's medication for that, and it's worked pretty well. I'm kidding.
You can drink it as well, just not
You can
during
drink
flight.
it, yeah.
That is very true. In all seriousness, no. You get into situations that Mother Nature is so dynamic. Winds may shift, or sometimes you come up on storms that aren't appearing on your radar that might take you by surprise. But we train for this, and I'm not going to say that I've never been nervous in the airplane. That would be a lie. But flying's my passion. I love what I do, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So not really. I don't really get nervous. I just enjoy the flight. I look forward to takeoff, and I look even more forward to landing.
Same thing here. Same thing.
Same thing. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
for sure. I mean, you're all trained for it, and it's also part of the job and the excitement, of course. You don't want to, or you say it's not like an office job where you want to sit behind a desk all day. I mean, our desk moves almost at the speed of sound.
Yeah.
You have the best view, you get paid for it. You're always working with professionals. Just like Melvin and myself, we fly long hauls, so we go to all kinds of places in the world.
And lots of coffee.
And lots of coffee, of course, as well. With
you guys have that luxury. I know some regional pilots that can't leave the flight deck, so they don't drink a lot of coffee as a result. They've got to hold it.
They bring it. It comes to the flight deck. You press the ding dong.
Yeah, but then it has to come out of you at some point, and that's where they run into trouble.
Sure.
So there's another bunch of questions about the side stick and the yoke, but I feel like we've already kind of covered that. Our friend Jared in episode 12 corrected me when I called it a joystick. So, folks, it is not a joystick; it's a side stick.
Side stick.
Yeah. So we've covered that. So
Makes
we'll
it
move
feel
on.
like more like a computer game, though, flying the side stick. It's like when I was 10 years old playing Flight Simulator, whatever version at home, with us, more or less the same kind of joystick, aka side stick. Just now it's real.
Now, man, Aernout, it must, for you, does it feel like you're just flying a giant building? I mean, that thing is so massive, and you're using a side stick with, that's not fighting you back. So, do you feel like you're actually flying an airplane?
Not at all. That's the thing. You look backwards, you see a door, a cockpit door, and there it stops. But then there's still 70 meters behind, which you don't see.
That's crazy.
And there's there's steps that go up. There's a bar. There's all kinds of stuff on board which you don't even think of, which is good. I think if you're in a landing with, let's say, 500 people on board, and you start thinking of that instead of thinking of landing, you could end up somewhere you don't want to end up with the airplane.
Yes, right. I've thought of that before too. If you're thinking of, as they call it in aviation, the number of souls on board, that could get overwhelming if you were dwelling on it too much.
Especially on this 380 with 500 plus seats, and then still sometimes you fly with more souls on board than with seats when the flight is overbooked and people carry infants on their lap.
Yeah. Well, and on the 380, you've got, with some airlines at least, you've got people sleeping in beds and taking showers.
Yeah.
So you got a whole little town.
Yeah, they have their suites.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Etihad has nice suites, and then Qatar Airways, they also have something.
Yeah,
They have a bar, if I'm correct. And Emirates now, they start with 2 configuration. It's like 600 plus, only business class and economy. That's crazy.
I don't have $10,000 to spend on a flight like that, so.
Why would you? I'd rather spend that on something outside of a flight.
Seriously.
Yeah, I don't think I can say on FlightCast what I spent it on. So
I
These
couldn't
people,
run
they
FlightCast.
spend it, they don't. Yeah, that's
So-
it. Flight cost guaranteed for life with that money. No?
There you go. Oh, exactly. Yeah. No, the donation levels aren't that high yet. But and actually, speaking of donations, Melvin, thank you for taking my mug up in the flight deck. I appreciate it. That was
Oh, for
awesome.
sure.
Those were nice
I-
pictures. Huh?
My boys thought
Yeah,
that was
we-
the coolest thing in the world.
Well, hey, it kept my coffee nice and warm, and it was weird. We were headed westbound over the Atlantic. I had a tailwind, so we were cruising almost about Mach point 86. We were Mach point 853 technically, but it was great to have a nice cup of coffee and know the owner behind the original design. So hey, man, anything to help out, always here to help.
Awesome. That's great.
I have to order mine soon as well.
Yes,
I'll
you
try
do.
to make some pictures.
Maybe I'll
I
just
have
send
to.
you one.
No, don't worry. I'll order. It's okay.
I'll send you a
Support
coupon
you.
code anyway. So, guys, Luke wants to know if you could fly with any other airline besides the one that you currently do, which of course we're not going to say. In the future, what would it be and why? And this is not to say that you don't like your current airline, but if you had a choice of flying for another one that you've maybe heard good things about, what would it be?
I think for me it'd be American Airlines. Just having worked for my previous carrier a while back that was wholly owned by them, I just like the way that they treat their employees pretty well. In a grand retrospect, it doesn't matter what airline you work for, well, unless you're Aernout. But you're always going to have some gripes about things that you could see better. But I just think in a big picture point of view, AMR Incorporation does a pretty good job in terms of keeping their employees happy and also providing a relatively good product for the customer as well.
Okay, nice. Aernout, how about you?
I have no idea, man. I've seen so many people leaving the Middle East. They go back to their home country, and then after half a year they regret it. Because the grass is always greener somewhere else in the end. And
That's true.
I'm not busy with leaving at all. I'm happy. The wife is happy. The family is happy, and
You just
the
said
rest
it.
is extra.
Because
Happy
if
wife.
The wife is
Like,
happy.
that's
Yep.
right, if Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
That's it.
So guys, let's chat a little bit about comparisons with some actual statistics. Aernout, this will be a bit of a repeat for you and a refresher for our listeners. We'll start with the A380, then move to the 777, which we actually haven't discussed in previous episodes. So for the A380, what are some general rules for flap settings and on takeoff?
Well, you can use flaps 1, 2, or 3. Full is only used for landing. Well, 3 and full can be used for landing. Normally it's full. And 3 you're not allowed to use for landing when the tailwind is 10 knots or more. So you can land up to 15 knots with flaps full tailwind.
And
that's
what's
it.
your
I
landing
mean,
speed when you're coming in on that thing?
Between 134 and 140 maximum.
Now,
That's below max landing weight and below.
I
If you
find
go above max landing weight, it will go up, of course. But
Okay. I find in infinite flight, if I'm on autopilot and I'm coming in and I've got my flaps full, I'm on final, if I disengage the autopilot, the nose is diving. And
that's a Boeing thing.
no, that was when I was flying the A380 before. a
No,
couple days
Airbus
ago.
is the thing you do when you disconnect the autopilot. When you're on the glide slope, you don't do anything. It's completely trimmed out in real life.
That's
So
probably
it will
the
just
issue.
follow the line.
Trim is
follow the
probably my
glide
issue.
No, but the airplane is auto trim. You don't have like the 737. That big trim wheel doesn't exist in any Airbus. Well, in the 300 maybe, I don't know, but 320 and above doesn't exist. It's auto trim, the airplane. You don't have to put side or back pressure if you turn left or right within a certain amount of degrees.
Okay, so for Melvin, for you, what are some general rules for flap settings on takeoff?
If you're flying at 200, typically we take off with flaps 5. Very rarely do we do 15 or 20. If you do 15 or 20, it's usually you're on a short runway, usually less than 7,000 feet, or you have wind shear. Since we don't have wind shear, and at least not that I know of, in infinite flight, don't worry about that. But flaps 5, if you're at the max takeoff weight, you're looking at a rotation on, a 20 degree Celsius day. you're looking at V1 of 157 and a rotate of 164. That's at max weight. If you're at like one of your lighter weights, around 360,000 pounds, once again at sea level on a 20-degree sea day, V1 of 125 and a takeoff or rotation of 127 using flaps 5. So, and the nose dip thing, that, like Aernout said, when you take off the autopilot, it should stay there. That could just be a cynicism thing, or it could just be, lack of trim as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still manual trim the 777 or not at all? It's all electrical.
If the autopilot is off, if the autopilot is off, then we use electronic trim on the control yoke. But if the autopilot's on, the autopilot trims itself.
Yeah, because in Airbus there's no trim. Even manual flying, it trims itself.
Oh wow! Yeah, we have manual trim when we're flying.
And if you're if you're coming in for landing and you're configuring the aircraft for landing on it, then let's talk infinite flight. So as much as the real life applies to infinite flight, give us some flap speeds and gear down, I guess, speed. And something I don't really know what to do in any aircraft or when to do is arming the spoilers. I just do it on final at some point usually, or if there's lots going on, maybe I'll do it earlier. But what does the preparation for landing look like in the 777?
Well, in the 777, and we'll pertain it to infinite flight, if you're on a down one, whether it's left or right, ideally you should be at flaps 5 by that point. At least be at flaps 1. The max speed for flaps 1, looking at your indicated airspeed, not your ground speed, as we see a lot of people do, is 255. You're below 10,000 feet, so you should be at 250 anyway or below. So, hey, if you're on downwind, put flaps 1 in. Before you turn base, or if you're given a command by ATC to, turn on the base leg, which you would perceive as the base leg, go for flaps 5 and slow your speed down to about 180, 190. When you start getting on the intercept or start turning towards final, once the glide slope starts moving down towards the middle, so it's coming from the top towards the bottom, that's a good time to go gear down. You want to go flaps 20, and you want to arm the spoilers at that point. Okay. And then as soon as the glide slope is captured, it was what we call capture, but it's in the center, so you want to follow it down. It's about 800 feet to 900 feet per minute. It's a good time to go flaps 30. When you do go flaps 20, slow your speed to around 160. And then once you get to 160, you can go to flaps 30 from that point, because the max speed for flaps 30 is 170 knots. But once you're flaps 30, you're fully configured, it's a good time to turn on your landing light. And I usually like to use about 40 to 50% trim. I know that seems like a lot, but it's a heavy airplane. And you do have to remember, you're flying this thing super slow, even though it has high energy lift devices on the leading edge of the wing. It needs a little bit of help. And that's how the real airplane is as well. So, don't be afraid to use a little bit of trim in there, even if it's 20%, just to help you out.
All right, so you're flaring at 30 feet and pulling power out at 30 feet as well, or at 10?
No, I set a very, very slow flare at 30 feet, and that's just barely pitching the nose up a little bit. At 10 feet, I go completely power out and just pitch a little bit more and hold it, and then you'll get a very nice touchdown.
Just glide it to the runway.
Pretty much.
So, Aernout, what would we say for the A380 for landing configuration?
Well, let's say your downwind will be max 200, 210 with flaps 1, just as an average. Turning base, you can put flaps 2. But what I always tell people when they ask me, I use the speed, try to maintain at least 180 knots to 10 miles on final. So then you can be reaching 2,500 feet, where you're supposed to be flaps 2 and put the gear down.
Lots of drag at that point.
But it depends on the distance, of course. Yeah, and at that point also, what Melvin says, you arm the spoilers. Gear down means arm spoilers on Airbus, at least now for us. And then you just follow. So you say 10 miles, you'll be 2,500, around 9 miles, 8.5. So flaps 2, gear down, then you're reducing speed to 160. So you put flaps 3 when you reach 6 miles with 160. At that point, you put your final approach speed, let's say 138. You put full flaps, and you will reach that speed, let's say around 4 miles, and you just continue. And one of the rules is in the airline to be fully configured at 1,000 feet, which means landing gear down and flaps configured, full flaps.
Okay, and that's an airline rule.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or airline policy.
And that's all throughout the world.
So in the end, most important is that you're fully configured at 1,000 feet. How you do it, it's up to you. But for us, one big point is 2,500 feet to be flaps 2 and gear down as a reference.
Okay.
And then the rest will work out.
Nice. And would your flare be similar to what Melvin described?
Yeah. More or less the same.
Okay.
Just look at the end of the runway, pitch up 3 degrees, and it will come.
Okay, guys. Well, is there anything else before I let you guys go that you'd like to add?
No, thank you, sir.
Thanks for having us. That's about it.
Yeah, it was fun.
Melvin and Aernout, thank you so much for battling it out today in our Boeing versus Airbus episode. I really appreciate you guys making time for me again.
Anytime.
That was Aernout and Melvin, and they join me on Skype from the Middle East and the USA. Well, thanks as always for listening. If you haven't already, head over to the App Store or Google Play and download Infinite Flight. For more of the podcast, visit our website and be sure to subscribe on iTunes and leave us a great review. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/FlightCastAudio and on Twitter at FlightCastAudio. If you have any ideas for the show, please leave them in the comments. FlightCast is brought to you by Linkhouse Media on the web at linkhousemedia.com. We can always use your financial support to keep us going, and a way to do that is to head over to flightcast.audio/shop and get your very own FlightCast hat, t-shirt, and other accessories. You can donate by visiting flightcast.audio and clicking the yellow donate button in the sidebar. To cover the fine print, FlightCast is not affiliated with Infinite Flight or Flying Development Studio. I'm Jason Rosewell. Thanks for listening, and happy landings.